When I want to know about esports, I go to his channel. This is Steel and you're watching Thorn.
TSM fans from League of Legends are always trying to imply I'm the one who's obsessed with TSM. Just absolute nonsense, isn't it? If they weren't so bad, I wouldn't have to keep talking about them, would I? And making delicious ad revenue from morons who have to click to get up. Oh, giving away the game plan there. Obviously, TSM a few months back, I will say, in my opinion, without much fanfare, re-entered Counter-Strike. And it has been donkey's years since they were in Counter-Strike. Like, for people who don't know, way back in 2015, they bought Dignitas's team that was already, as Richard often says, in the ascendancy. They were becoming potentially an event champion. They're already a contender, but they just hadn't gotten over the hump yet. Carrigan was in the lineup. They got this team. They obviously became a team that won 5 LAN tournaments that year. We're getting in the mix in the majors again. What happened was they had a dispute where the Danish players wanted their coach slash manager guy to be paid, a guy called Frederick Biskov, who later went on to found Blasted Astralis, as far as I know. And basically, the TSM just didn't want to pay for that. And then also, I think the problem is it wasn't as simple as just TSM. Like, for example, the players didn't want to do any content because they were traveling all the time, but content's basically how teams like TSM or Optic and Call of Duty with Hex, that's how those teams sort of understood how to make their money, that you then get the sponsor activations, you do fun content, and that's what keeps people happy, not necessarily results in the server, whereas those players only care about results in the server. Then also, at the time, salaries were exploding. The perception with a lot of teams was, unless you want to be part of an arms race of salary, it's just going to get crazier and crazier and crazier. And at the time, Reggie didn't know you could make money off the team, supposedly. So he let them go. They became Astralis. You know what? ... Greatest team of all time, 4 majors, a bazillion things, Grand Slam era. You know what? Reginald doesn't always have the best decision making. After that, though, they attempted the next year to come back and do an NA lineup. I get it. You get NA players, you get someone amiable like Sean Gares. You got the starts of a team, right? Again, you build content around them, you build some hype around them. The problem was that team didn't even get off the ground because if people remember, they had the whole scenario where it was the PEA, and they wanted the players to play in the PEA and to skip ESL Pro League, and then the players mutinied, and the whole Sean Gares as a Reggie thing. In the middle, by the way, you had that period earlier that year when they had the all-NA lineup that was like Semface and Twists and Sake, etc. The problem with that one is they had that one little fluke run where they just won a bunch of cobblestone at ESC Season 1. That was it. After that, they didn't really do much. They weren't that relevant. So basically, TSM, let's be real, since 2016, so we're talking like 6+ years, have been irrelevant / not in Counter-Strike. So they've come back, and the problem is, 1, because they used to have Astralis, and 2, it's TSM. People hear that brand, and they still think, that's like a New York Yankees of esports, that dreaded term. So they think, oh, they're going to be spending. They think it's like another Falcons going to splash in the cash, get crazy players. And what do you know? The lineup they announce, 1, clearly is not crazy money. 2, isn't even a set of players that people were like heavily seeking from the tier 1 teams. In fact, these are somewhat cast-offs / pretty much all people who couldn't make it into the tier 1 teams in their current given role. And also, you got the whole component where it's like, you look at the players they're supposedly trying to poach. It's other Into the Breach players like Rallen. He's been around for donkey's years. There's no way that costs like 20k a month. So if you look at this team, it is very clearly both a budget roster, and I would even say potentially a cynical min-max, because actually, considering the actual, like, if I took the nameplates off, I think you'd be incredibly underwhelmed by this team, like if you've seen them play online. But if I show you the names, hey, these names aren't that bad, actually. Hey, it's not bad ones here. You've got people who've done things in majors, won big tier 1 events, been a part of #1 teams in the world, been alongside some of the best players. Suddenly you look at it, interesting little mix. So let's get into it, shall we? I'll start with the most famous player in the team, Valdir, the Danish player. People might know I like Valdir, so I've gotten along very well with. I've always championed his game. I actually thought once upon a time he could have been a very strong... well, he had 2 options. He could have been a very strong sort of mid-round type player, like potentially a Magisk if he'd been in the top teams. There's also a world where, you know, from OG, he got very good as a bomb site. Anke could have been kind of another Xyp9x. I often thought he should be the one who should have replaced Xyp9x in Astralis once they decide to move on / bench him. He's a smart player. He's clearly a player who had talent, who could shoot people. Apparently he's very dedicated. The issue is in moving around these roles and in sitting on the bench so much and being a part of, like, he tried to become a star again in Ents. He was sat on the bench, not joining Ostrowski, wanted to join EG. That didn't work out. He's all over the place. He's kind of getting lost in the mix the last few years. And unfortunately, that does seem to have had a knock on where both his identity's gotten lost a bit and his reputation has been tanked. So I think this move is seeking a new identity. It's turn over a new leaf. We're going to start as an IGL. Listen, you've worked with MSL for all those years. You've seen how he runs the game. You've worked with Cadian. You've worked with Snappy. Remember, this guy was the fragger in Heroic back in 2016 when his IGL was Snappy and his secondary caller was Glaive. So this guy's been around them. He's been around Alexi B. This guy's been around some people who are very good in-game leaders, past and present. So I do think if you look at the prototype of the player who becomes the in-game leader, most of the names I just mentioned, by the way, this is exactly how you get it done. He seems like he could get it done. And quite frankly, it's a huge if, but if he can become a top 10/top 15 in-game leader, I believe his skill level over the years means that actually he doesn't have to just be like a low fragging one who has no, he could be like Alexi B or Glaive, where they can frag and they can be the IGL. And that will be both an ace up your sleeve, but more importantly, for a team like this, I think it's almost essential if you actually look at the squad. Like, you go look at the stats, he already somewhat has to be one of the people fragging for them to have a chance to win, it feels like. So the Valde one, the big problem is it's enormous if he's going to become a really good in-game leader, and he doesn't have the best pieces. And crucially, he doesn't have the players who are the hard carry firepower players right now beyond maybe one. So his issue also is he's going to have to get very creative and very good at calling and reading the game to even give TSM a chance. Like right now, how are they even going to qualify to lands? There's no invites coming. Are they buying a slot? Slots are supposedly going away in here. Who knows what's going on? Like, the future at the moment is looking very murky and there's not a whole lot of light shining through those clouds. So already I started with my biggest name and I've had to pick all these holes in it and just completely pick apart the name. So it's not a good sign. The second name, thankfully, is a big name, but I don't have to pick it apart. This is one of the few players I actually think is just bona fide in this team. There's two I think are actually slam dunks, well, good signings. And this is, of course, Inters, the Russian player, formerly of Gambit Esports / Cloud9, when they were Cloud9. Now, listen, this guy's been in the top 8 of majors. He's been at the semi-final of a major. He has won a lot of online tournaments, the odd LAN. He's been a part of a lineup that at one point in time was very dangerous online. They were fantastic when they were Gambit. I always thought he was the most underrated Gambit player. Meanwhile, I always thought Nafani was the most overrated. Like, this guy, for me, I mean, you get a player like this, as long as they keep their head together, you don't ever let go of him, because you're not going to find another player like that. I've always said he's like Perfecto light. Think about what Perfecto brings you. Like, play as an anchor, play on the sites, play on the shitty CT roles, play in the hard spots, stay alive, use utility, calm, play intelligently, don't just be a free trade death. This guy knows what he's doing. He seems to have a very good mind. I think he has quite a solid mentality too. He wasn't one of the players choking for me. That's the thing. He wasn't the one putting them over the top and winning them a game. He was the one shoring up their weaknesses. And as you've seen now, Axel and Shiro alone isn't it. They have so many holes elsewhere in that team, and I had him when Shiro's there, that actually, since they kicked this guy, did it improve things much? Did it make them a better team? I would say no. I think it made them a much less consistent team, much less of a unit, quite frankly. Now they're just a disparate set of players, right? So I think that was a terrible kick. I think that was a really silly kick that probably should have been Nafani or Hobbits, but they kicked the guy with the low stats. He did the shitty job, because that's what happens when you let players have influence on these moves, in my opinion. So I've always thought he was underrated. I think it's a bang-on signing. If you want a player to be that sort of supportive element. Now, the downside here is there's one downside to Inters. You should probably be able to guess it. Remember what I said in the first sentence? Russian player. Right, obviously, his first language isn't English. Now, Valdez isn't either, but when you're from a Nordic country, it may as well be, because Valdez speaks phenomenal English, like better than Americans is the joke, right? Inters probably just speak okay English. If you heard those Gambit players when they were in Cloud9, they did little burger reviews. Axel was like, and then Shiro was like, I don't know about that. Like, he could barely talk about a burger he was eating with no pressure whatsoever. So I don't really know how what my supportive element potentially having difficulties calming or understanding the strat or what the call is or other rotational calls. So you can see there's some flaws here, but as a player, I do like this signing. I don't mind it if you had the stars. Then you've got Jax. Now, it's debatable as to whether Jax or Inters is the big name. I feel like Jax has been sort of out of the news for a long enough time that the Zoomers won't necessarily remember or know him. all the same, he was playing back in 2019, he was no bomb. The thing about Jax is, you saw that he is still capable of doing something meaningful on a real tier 1 level against real opponents when he stood in for that blast groups for Vitality, and you saw how Apex used him. Apex seemed like he had a good sense of how to use him, when to put him in the right situations. The problem is, the temptation with this guy is just to say he's a hard entry, throw him to the Wolves, and if you just do that, it's going to be rough. But luckily, this team, you got Cypher. So between the two, you can surely make this pairing work. And surely this isn't even a bad pairing. They could play off each other. They've both got the very good, strong mentality to go in. Both got good skills. The key thing for me is this. I always describe Jax as, he actually has skill. He just never has the stats. So it's like when I used to say back in the day, Stanislaw would have terrible stats. But you ever watch his game? The eye test on his kills was like, these are really good, actually. This guy's actually got some fucking mechanics, but he never had the stats. I mean, you wonder, how's he using himself in the game? With Jax, the problem for me is this. It does feel like teams abusively use him. The French scene, they did it with Apex himself. It's probably why Apex understands what this guy needs. They will just use you as the meat and then just perma-use you like that, as if you're just a piece of trash to be traded. Like, they won't give you the setup. They'll be stingy with the utility. So I hope they're not going to do that in this team, because I do think this guy can contribute and have much better stats than people realise. He does have skills. Some of his highlights are bonkers. It's just that, I mean, he's an older player. He's a very amiable player. I get the feeling, much like a JKS, he'll just let things go. He'll do what people ask. He'll let himself get pushed out of roles. So I hope in this team they have a sense of who he is. Having a French coach is going to help. We'll see about when Raging joins, apparently. So I don't mind that signing. It's more just how are you going to use him as the tricky angle. Also, I'll just put this in there. He can speak English. He just doesn't like to, as far as I know. Like, when I was at the after parties, all the other players in his team would be speaking. Him and Amanek were the two sort of quiet ones. As far as I know, he's the one who just speaks in French to the other guys in the group with you, and then they maybe say something to you. So the only downside, he's a bit older, can't teach you dog new tricks and all that. Just if he wants to and he embraces it, he's such an amiable guy. He could be a mega glue guy in this team. He's even a good player to round out your squad. I just hope he works on that English. Again, it's not great having Inter's Jax in terms of the English communication, because it's an international team. But in theory, not a bad player. You're going to see the weird thing about this is none of these players are actually bad as far as I can tell. It's just, is the combo right? And are these the right players together? They're also the overlap. Then you've got Cypher. Now, you'll know, I thought he looked awesome at the major. I actually even think, quite frankly, he looked like one of the players. It was him and Ima were the two obvious ones to me could carry that form over. I mean, look, we already knew Nok was good, but like they were the ones that could hold up. I didn't know, like, will Boros actually make it? Who knows what the GL guy's going to do? There was some players out there that were having some stats and numbers. Isaac was the obvious one. Like, are these players really going to make it in tier 1? Cypher looks like no, he is. Not least because what fluke is there? His style was for real, like using his raw aim and like press W religion, just going in crazy style and forcing duels wherever you want. When you have a player like that, he is going to make your trading game very strong if you use him right. And as I mentioned, if you've also got Jax, boys, I could see where this could work. This could be a pretty dynamic sort of entry duo, right? The obvious issue, if you have Cypher, though, is he's going to get you kills, but his stats aren't going to be great if he's going to be among a hard entry pack, right? It's going to be hard to get those stats up unless he's the one who plays off. But I get the feeling he's the one who goes in as well, right? So, I don't know. And now we've only got one name left, and this guy's a nobody. It is Modo, the Romanian AWPer, 20-year-old Romanian AWPer. Now, look, the 20 part, that helps a lot. Got time to develop. Maybe we've got him when he's young. Maybe he's going to be the next good player. Problem is, there are a bazillion players at tier 1.5 to 2 to 3 who are like good AWPers on the internet. So, yeah, he watches game online. Yeah, he frags. Okay, cool. He has to. If he doesn't, we can't have him in this team, because that's the role when you get to LAN that is played by the best star players in the world. So you're going to have a hard time unless this guy not only is good online, but gets you to the LANs, and then he has to start performing immediately. Not least because I'd replace him if not. I mean, by the way, this is a team where I don't care what anyone says. I'm looking at this team and thinking, mate, what if I put Dexter in Modo's spot? Don't we just start cooking immediately? Isn't that the sort of move? If they're toxic and selfish, great. You know what? Be toxic and selfish. Give me those frags, mate. I'll get all these nice guys around you and cool guys to just make the team work. We could take 4 cool, chill guys and 1 toxic player who frags out of his mind. That combination works in CSGO if you know what you're doing. So to me, I don't think he'd influence the others, basically. The key thing is, he's fragging so far, but he's going to have to. He's going to have to do a lot of work as the fucking AWPer of this team. Then the whole problem is the big upside was supposed to be the coach. It was supposed to be ex-stars returning. And then with Jax, a player he's used in the past, man, this is awesome. He's going to get the best out of all these players and make an interesting combination. No, he's gone already, straight back to Vitality. So I'm assuming the Lambert guy, who used to actually be a player, I think, in like Envious Academy or something, along with Jax, I'm assuming he's back. He's like, as the assistant coach stepped in, and then apparently they're getting Raging. If they're getting Raging, I like that move. I actually think Raging's a good coach. I think he did good work at Mouse. He was also one of the people supposedly responsible for helping like Rob switch up his CT spots on Mirage, which helped spawn him into a star player and change up some of Frozen's roles so that he became a bit more impactful as a 16-year-old, whatever, Slovakian, just getting his land reps in at tier 1. So I think Raging's a good signing. Has a pretty big personality, if people don't know. I'd say he's more of the guy in the locker room who's willing to go head-to-head with some of the players. I think that's actually a positive, even though this team seems like it's mainly filled with just chill guys. Doesn't feel like they need sort of like telling off. Maybe just kick up the arse a little bit, right? So if you look at the pros, the problem is, yes, no piece is bad/terrible in theory, despite what I'm going to have to now conclude about the overall roster, which is I don't think it can work. I just think it fundamentally cannot work and accomplish what you want to do. Get to the lands, do anything at the lands, win anything. It's got a good balance in theory of aggressive and defensive, both tendencies and roles. You've got Cypher and Jax on the aggressive end. You've got a bit more of the Valde and Inters. The last few years, more the defensive end, more like staying in positions. You've got the aggressive young Orpa. This sounds like it can work, right? You've even got some good attitudes. I don't know the Modo guy, but I know Valde, Jax, Cypher and Inter all seem like pretty cool guys. They seem like they've actually got their head screwed on properly. They know how to do their work. They know how to play their roles. They will not be unselfish. This sounds like there shouldn't be too much ego in this team, right? Problem is, sometimes ego goes hand in hand with top players, right? Now, the issues are obvious, as I've run down there. The first one leaps off the page. Just like in football, you have to be able to score goals to win games. You have to be able to shoot and kill people in Counter-Strike to win games. It's very, very hard if you're getting out fragged all the time, just as it's very hard to win football games where you don't have possession. So the most obvious thing this team has a problem with is firepower. Modo, there's not even a question of he might. He must deliver with the AWP at an impressive level, or they're not even going to get off the ground. Valde, in theory, can frag, right? But he's now supposed to be the in-game leader. He's putting all his focus there. Cypher can frag, I know that, but his stats are never going to be some crazy differential because of his role and his style. So you look at the team, realistically, the last few years, Valde, Inters, and Jax are all low stats players. These are all players pushed to the outskirts, given the least role, and then they get the low stats. So now you're basically saying, Cypher, get even better, and then Modo, you just better be everything we think you are, and more probably. Then you've obviously got the leadership angle. I've got to wait for Valde to show me something, to show me mastery. It's all well good having conversations and seeing things and theorising. And, well, I worked with him and I understood that. No, just show me the server. Just call some games. Just show me some strats. Get the maps nailed down. Figure out people's roles. Yeah, I was in-game leader enough donkeys years ago. And even he sort of admitted he wasn't like a top in-game leader then. And he actually had to learn a lot about the role when he was thrown into it. By the way, that lineup didn't last very long, did it? I also think experience is an issue. Modo has none that I care about. Cypher has a tiny little bit, still barely played any big lands, guys. Jax has some, but still not even tons. He got kind of a lot taken out by the online era. Inters has a year or two, fair enough. Valde has lots, just not as in-game leader. So you can see, you go down the reasons. It's pretty dire, right? Coaching-wise, yeah, I need them to have a big name. I need them someone with some balls, coming in with a vision. Also, Raging is someone I can tell you who can scout players, so he'll hear about people and find people. He might be able to find you the next player to add in, because the future of this team doesn't exist if you keep these 5 players, in my opinion. You immediately need a star player. So then the question becomes, does TSM have money? Like, I don't worry about teams like Falcon, by the way. Falcons eventually will get a really good lineup because they'll just keep waiting for the right opportunities, approaching people, offering money, spending money, and then they will get the players they need. Does TSM just keep min-maxing and keep a cynical team and not do anything? I'm worried because I don't know if TSM has money, guys. They were sponsored by the FTX company for $110 million or whatever over 10 years. That didn't last very long. That went away. The TSM was American League of Legends. They've just sold their slot, and for not very much money, by the way. In Valorant, they don't even exist anymore. The TI lineup, the Dota 2 lineup was just released, and the org said they are exiting North America. Where are they in the big games? Like, this is the furthest they are in CSGO with a budget roster. So I get the vibe because of esports winter. Maybe they don't have money to spend, or maybe they can only spend on small people, or maybe they're just not able to actually sort of get the kinds of salaries that any top player would be willing to join for. Hence why they're out there trying to scrounge around and apparently poach fucking into the breach players. Not that they're bad players, by the way. Just obviously, it's not. We're thinking of TSM supposed to be a tier 1. Like, they should be going for the top 5, top 10 in the world. The obvious move to me is you go out and you get an FPL type star with nice mechanics on the rifle. You put him in a star role, let him rack up some stats. You've got the pieces around him. I feel like as soon as you get that player, if they're legit, the pieces are right around you. When I make content, it isn't just me, the mic, and a guest or a topic. It's also me with the support of my whole crew. Who's that, you might ask? The Skrilluminati. That's who. They include Frisky, Matt Pugnaccio-Racula, Ahmed Hadju, Tosh, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Gore, Animosity, Toucan, and you know it if you've heard it before, but if you haven't, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Well, if you want to know upcoming topics and guests I'm going to have on my channel, maybe you want to ask me a question to answer in an AMA in video fashion. Do you want to hear one of those long discussions and actually be part of it and be able to ask me questions? Want to find out who I'm going to interview next? If any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.